Good afternoon. My name is Karina Barreo. For our next session, we are welcoming on stage Evan Spiegel, co-founder and CEO of Snap, in conversation with Sara Fischer, senior media reporter at Axios. Over to you, Sara.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are honored and privileged to be with Evan Spiegel, the co-founder and CEO of Snapchat. Evan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
This is
we were told to bring the energy, so we're...
Yes, let's bring the energy. This is a fun one for us because the last time we did this, we were on a yacht in Cannes. So it's just a little bit of a different vibe here in our suits. But it's an important conversation. Last time we were talking about a lot of innovation on the business side of Snap. And today we're here to talk a lot about, more broadly, sort of Evan's perspective on the world, from where he sits in terms of innovation, competitiveness, security, et cetera. So let's just start off with what Snap is really focused on, which is augmented reality. I know we're talking a lot about AI, but you have chosen to put more of your effort into AR. Why is that?
Well, Snapchat, the application, really transformed the world with visual communication. So we just found that people wanted to be able to share photos and videos really quickly. That helped people build relationships. Of course, those relationships help make them happier. And that's really the beating heart of our service. But because Snapchat opens into the camera, about 10 years ago, we started building augmented reality lenses so that people could change the way that they look, send more entertaining videos to their friends. And we just saw an explosion in engagement with AR. So over 250 million people engage with AR every single day just on Snapchat. That doesn't include our partners who use our technology in their own apps and services. And today that's still constrained to this tiny little phone screen. And so we realized that there was a huge opportunity in bringing computing and bringing augmented reality out into the world and changing the way that people interact with computing overall, leveraging their natural gestures, allowing people to actually move around. Because we hear from folks all the time that they love the value they get from technology, the value they get from their phone, but oftentimes they feel like it's a distraction that's actually getting in the way of them fully experiencing the world around them. And so with augmented reality, you get the benefits of computing, but it's actually anchored in the world around you. So you don't have to give up the natural world to be able to get the benefits of computing.
But if you look around at some of the other big tech companies, Meta is clearly focused on the metaverse and virtual reality. You have Microsoft and Google going very heavily into AI. It sort of feels like Snapchat has a lane in that it being the only one to focus on AR. But the question would be, are you approaching that lane without a business plan? Like, what's the actual way you're going to build a business around AR? Because clearly no one else is trying to do that right now.
Well, today we generate revenue from augmented reality because companies build AR lenses that add value to people's everyday, and they pay us to then distribute them through our camera. I think in the future, if people are accessing augmented reality experiences through glasses or something like that, that there'll be many ways to monetize those experiences, whether it's through added value services that people pay for, or advertising, things like that.
But you sometimes also use AI to help out with your AR. Like Snapchat launched a My AI tool, which is a chatbot for young people. Do you expect to be using more AI for your AR? Are you going to invest there?
Well, the intersection of AI and AR over the long term, over the next 5-10 years, I think will be really exciting. One of the reasons why it's so exciting is because when you're wearing AR glasses, you can share with computers what you're seeing, what you're doing, of course, what you're saying. And so using those as inputs into an AI model can help you, solve everyday tasks a lot more easily. You can point at something interesting and say, what is that? And of course, leverage large language models and these multimodal models that understand images and videos to be able to get helpful tips or a new recipe if you're in your kitchen or something like that. So I think wearable technology and AR in particular is going to leverage artificial intelligence in a lot of really exciting ways.
And what is Snap's plan for wearables? Because I know when there was sort of a low point in the ad market, Snap said we want to be really responsible with our energy and sort of focused away from its glasses and its hardware. Do you expect that you're going to reinvest in a few years? When does that come back?
Yeah, we're continuing to invest in our AR hardware as we have been for nearly 10 years now. We've tried to take a more R&D focused approach to building AR glasses. So rather than building them at tremendous scale, which is really expensive, tried to make really focused technology bets and just consistently and steadily make improvements. And one of the big parts of unlocking augmented reality and AR glasses in particular is the optical engine. So we've been very focused on the waveguide, which is the piece of glass that sits in front of your eye, and the projector system that both work together to embed computing in the world around you, project computing out into the world around you. So that we've been making slow and steady progress on the technical improvements there. That'll be a big unlock, I think, for AR glasses, at larger scale.
So Snap's doing a lot across technology, AR, AI. We've talked about it all. But we, for the first time, are feeling a real competitive threat in the social media space from China with TikTok and other social media platforms. How has your world view changed with the rise of TikTok in terms of competition compared to before, when your biggest competitors were the Metas of the world, YouTubes, et cetera?
Yeah, it's definitely changed the dynamic for our business. There's no doubt about that. I think maybe it dovetails into the broader issues that America is sort of grappling with at the moment. If you think about sort of America's innovation recipe, it's this combination of democracy, which really protects the individual, allows great new ideas to emerge, with capitalism that attracts capital to those ideas to really help them flourish. And it's this open system that I think has really helped support U.S. innovation over the last 200 some odd years, which has doubled life expectancy and, of course, massively increased GDP per capita and things like that. And I think we're at a very interesting moment because America was the only game in town after World War II. And so we didn't think all that much about, maybe the challenges of having a totally open system. We just reaped the benefits. We worked with allies and partners around the world. We innovated. We shared a lot of those innovations and helped other countries really thrive. And I think now, we're realizing that there are some challenges to having such an open system. A democracy, for example, is actually quite susceptible to adversaries or strategic competitors trying to shape the way that people in our country think and feel. And obviously, they've been given tools like social media that allows folks to do that at scale in a very targeted way. And so a democracy is vulnerable in some ways. This open system is vulnerable because our competitors can use it to actually change outcomes in our country. Similarly, with capitalism, for example, I think competitors have realized that it's a very potent tool, not only for achieving their own goals by attracting capital for their own businesses, but because it's an incentive system that works really effectively in our country. And I think we've seen this to some degree. You referenced TikTok, where there are U.S. investors, I think, own a majority of that business, and they're advocating very effectively to keep TikTok in the United States of America. And so I do think the openness of America has been one of its great strengths. But at this moment in time, we're really trying to figure out how to navigate protecting that system, protecting that openness, but also strengthening it to withstand competitive pressure.
So how do we go about addressing national security concerns, like potentially TikTok, while also preserving that openness, that capitalism that defines American democracy? What would be your suggestion?
Well, I think the key here is to really avoid taking an absolutist position. And I think, unfortunately, that's been a bit of the debate that I've seen play out, where people feel like any work that we do to, restrict, for example, I think, maybe a good recent example would be tariffs on EVs entering the United States, right? That, I think, has helped protect U.S. manufacturers, give them an opportunity to invest in EVs here, which we view as very important to our future and, of course, the environment. But there's been a lot of pushback around that, especially from auto parts suppliers, for example, who want to be able to, of course, support EVs from strategic competitors here in the United States. So I think we have to take a more nuanced view. We have to abandon the notion that if we do protect some aspects of our democratic systems or our capitalist systems, that's compromising on this notion of having a free and open society. I think we have to understand that in many cases it will be protecting it. I think maybe a more tangible example as well is thinking about real guidelines on trade, for example, with strategic competitors, understanding that the vast majority of things that we trade back and forth are totally fine, whether they're diapers or children's toys or whatever. But there are going to be strategic areas where we're going to want to compete and we're not going to want to have free and open trade. And I think the more clarity we can get on that, and faster, the better it will be for businesses who are really looking for clarity and consistency in the approach.
And what role should companies like yours and people like yourself play in working with the government to shape some of these guidelines and rules? Should you be having meetings? Should there be a regulatory agency helping to oversee this stuff? What would be your recommendation?
I think that's a really great question. I've seen no substitute for just good old-fashioned face-to-face interaction, talking through some of the problems. I think both businesses and government bring a lot of assumptions to these conversations that end up, maybe not necessarily proving out as folks had expected. We've, for example, given feedback on chips. Everyone's really excited about these huge investments in American semiconductor capacity, but they're very, very difficult to access for smaller businesses like ours that are working, to develop advanced semiconductors. And so I think when we can provide that sort of feedback and be open about ways that America can be more competitive, then we can problem solve together.
What's your take on how government is working with the tech sector now compared to when it was when you were first starting to come to Washington a few years ago? Do you think it's become more or less productive? What's your take?
Well, I think there is a really strong desire to understand new technology. I think we're seeing a lot of excitement around artificial intelligence right now. I think tech, always seems to have some shiny new thing to get folks excited. What I worry about is that we still haven't made progress on a lot of the fundamentals. So I think federal privacy regulation is a great example. We're one of the last countries in the world that still doesn't have a comprehensive privacy regulation. These are the sorts of foundational sort of cornerstones that actually will help us accelerate innovation in AI, right? And I think what we're seeing right now in Europe, for example, with things like GDPR or even the DSA and DMA, which they use to regulate technology businesses, that's given them a really solid foundation that I think will create more flexibility to explore with AI, because they're less concerned about some of the privacy risks or less concerned about misinformation because they've handled that with broader, more foundational legislation.
Is it a bigger priority for you to help push some of those fundamentals ahead?
We certainly try. We can't claim to be experts here in the way that Washington works, but I think just trying to offer our perspective and see how we can help, has been most useful.
Given that AR is like the bulk of your business, it's what you do, it's what you're passionate about, do you feel like you are getting a good enough response from the government in understanding that particular technology?
I do think right now the big focus is on artificial intelligence, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't educate, about where we think the world's going in terms of augmented reality. I think, for example, Jensen, who I believe is speaking later today, has been talking about artificial intelligence for a really long time. We've been working on, many businesses have been working on artificial intelligence projects for a really, really long time, and it's only now getting, a real moment in the spotlight. And I think that's kind of what's fun about technology, that it comes in these really massive waves, but often is the result of decades of really hard work by a lot of brilliant folks to make these innovations possible. So we have to keep educating folks about the opportunity in augmented reality, and I think it'll have its moment sometime in the future.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about the waves, because it felt like in the past 2 years we went through a unique wave, and that after the pandemic the ad market boomed and then it cratered. And I think a lot of social media companies, including Snap, are starting to look at subscriptions as an opportunity for their business. But obviously, that's a totally different landscape than what we're used to, both from governing it and from using it. Do you think this push towards subscriptions is going to be the next frontier? Do you think it's just a trend?
Well, I think everyone right now is really focused on diversifying their revenue. You're seeing subscription-based businesses adopt ad models. You're seeing folks who've been selling advertising moving into subscription. So I think in general, folks are looking at diversifying their businesses at this moment in time, and folks are going to try and experiment with a bunch of different things. We never thought that Snapchat Plus could get the traction that it has now. It has 5 million paying subscribers. So we'll kind of see where it goes from here.
And do you have any plans to enhance the subscription, add new features, or just kind of keep it the way it is?
Oh, we're always adding new features. I mean, it's almost weekly at this point. I think that's one of the reasons why people really love to subscribe. They get access to new features before they become available to our broader community.
In terms of these features, your audience is pretty young. A lot of Snapchat users are Gen Z or millennials like myself, but that means that you have a different responsibility in terms of safety. How do you perceive your role in managing sort of safety innovation for all the tech firms?
Managing safety for all the tech firms.
No big deal.
What we've always tried to do on safety and privacy is just lead through our products. So, for example, 12 years ago now, when we started building Snapchat, we talked about the importance of privacy and the connection between privacy and self-expression. People feeling comfortable sharing their full selves with their friends because the images and videos disappear. And we took a data minimization approach to just throw out as much data as we could, rather than hoarding data around individuals. And that's another example of something that in the early days people said we were crazy, and then 10 years later people began to really understand the importance of privacy. I think when it pertains to young people, one of the things we've really focused on is building a differentiated experience on Snapchat for people who are under the age of 18. So making it really hard for folks to, add friends that they don't know, people who aren't in their contact book or they're not mutual friends with, changing the content experience to make sure that content is age appropriate for folks under the age of 18, providing a lot of tools for people to get help if they need it. If someone sends them an inappropriate message, they can flag it and report it to our team so that we can help. I also think it's really important to empower parents. So one of the things we've done is build Family Center that we modeled on parents' real life interactions with their teens. So, for example, we've got a 12-year-old at home, but he's acting like a teenager. And one of the things that we found is we like to know who he's hanging out with, who his friends are. We don't listen to every single conversation he's having with his friends, but it's really helpful for us to understand who he's hanging out with. And so in Family Center, for example, you can link your account with your teen's account and see who they're talking to. You don't get to see the contents of the communication, but you get a sense for who their friends are, and it allows you to start conversations with your teen about who they're communicating with. So I think trying to empower parents and then doing everything we can to make sure people have a safe and positive experience on our service has been really important to us.
And do you think that should be your responsibility or the government's? And I ask because there's so many state laws that are being introduced to limit how kids can access the internet. Utah passed a bill, Arkansas almost had something go into law. Like, should this be the role of the government to create these rules, or should the platforms hold the responsibility to protect the users?
Well, we really do see it as our responsibility. We think that that's something that's really important. I think, what typically happens with regulation is that folks, maybe don't see it as their responsibility, or they make mistakes that end up impacting, their community, and then regulation's necessary. But I think ideally, if we can continue to innovate and serve our community, keep them safe, and give parents great tools, to help stay in touch with their teens and understand what they're doing on our platform, then hopefully, it makes the need for regulation maybe less necessary.
Making some of those investments is tough because you have to make sure that you have enough, profit to be able to pour into things like safety, security, innovation. Right now, Snapchat is publicly traded, and it's a brutal time for a lot of companies on the public market. Do you think that for US to stay competitive, the public markets are going to continue to be the way to do that?
Gosh, so this is really about public markets and innovation. I don't think that public market volatility has all that much to do with innovation, to be honest with you. I think one of the things that can slow down innovation, what happens in bigger companies, people become much more focused on getting a promotion, instead of taking a risk, of course, folks become much more focused on quarterly numbers or short-term metrics rather than just serving their community with the best possible products they create. But I think that's really what makes leadership important, why it is so important to create a long-term vision that serves your community, and then think of your share price or your revenue or whatever as an output of the things that you do to serve your customers and make sure they're happy.
Snapchat's down from its pandemic high, as are most tech firms, down trading at around $8. Do you feel pressure from your investors to be doing things in the short term for financial gain, or do you think that they're giving you a long enough leash to be able to make some of these investments?
It's not just our investors. Our team is compensated in stock. So I feel a lot of pressure from our team as well. And we all feel a lot of pressure. We want, of course, to make our business successful for our investors, but most importantly for our community who we serve. We reach over 750 million people around the world who use Snapchat, and we want to make sure we can continue to provide them with a great service.
When we think about this tension in terms of global competition, we talked about this emerging threat from China, coming in to a democratic society. But one thing we haven't talked about is sort of the in-between, which is Europe. And I'm just curious, when you're going to Europe and you're having these types of conversations around competition, what's their take?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, I would say I've been very impressed by Europe's thoughtful approach to regulation. They've done a really good job going out and listening, of course, to all of their constituents, but also to the businesses that they seek to regulate. And even though we don't always agree necessarily with the path that they've laid out, we find that their approach is typically really thoughtful, and we can really understand the decision-making process there. So I think just in terms of their legislative process, it has been quite impressive. I think at the same time, they're really thinking about how to jumpstart innovation in Europe itself. There's an incredible amount of technical talent. I think the capital base there is developing, and so they are really working hard to make sure that they can continue to lead and innovate as well. I think where it gets tricky in terms of geopolitics is that Europe is a collection of many different types of countries with many different types of languages and different worldviews, and increasingly I think sometimes they feel stuck in the middle of some of the U.S. and China conversations that are happening right now. So I think Europe's very focused on developing their own vision for the future, being able to have the capacity to invest in it and realize it, while managing some of the emerging tensions between the U.S. and China.
You clearly think about these issues a lot from a 10,000-foot view. You like to study these types of things. Is there a particular industry that you're eyeing right now that's inspiring you, that you're learning from, that you can apply some of those principles to what you're doing today?
Oh gosh. It's different than the can questions, I have to say.
Very different.
Well, one of the things that really gets me excited right now is all the innovation happening in energy. Energy is vitally important, of course, to the future of our country, but the environment as well. And it flows through every single thing that we touch. The chairs that are made here, the stage, of course, all of us getting here today. And so I think it's going to take real breakthrough innovation in energy to be able to get to where we want to go in terms of the environment. But even more importantly, if we can make energy nearly free and widely available to all people, the innovation that will come out of that can be extraordinary. So in the in California, for example, right now we struggle with water. There's just not enough water to go around, but we have it. It's just in all the wrong places. And if you had nearly infinite energy, you can move that water around in a way that's cost effective and would allow more people, to access water cheaply and more cheaply and in abundance. So I'm very interested in a lot of the energy innovation that's happening right now, because I do think it's going to unlock a new era of American abundance if we can really crack some of these very tricky and complex technical problems that could give us nearly free and infinite energy.
Fascinating. Okay, so I work at a company called Axios. We like to end all of our work with one fun thing. So I have one fun thing to ask you. When you come to DC, pretend you have no meetings, no business. Like, what would be your ideal fun day?
I go to Nando's and the Lincoln Memorial. Those are my two.
Humble.
Yeah.
Amazing. Evan Spiegel, CEO of Snap and co-founder of Snap. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.